The morning my daughter told me she'd sign the papers, I was standing at the kitchen counter peeling a peach for my granddaughter's lunchbox. The juice ran down my wrist, and I remember thinking I should wipe it before it got sticky. That's the thing nobody tells you about the worst moments of your life. They don't announce themselves. They sneak in while you're holding a paring knife and worrying about a sticky countertop. Mom, I need you to listen and not get emotional, she said. My daughter has been saying that to me since she was 19 years old, as if my feelings were a thermostat she could set to whatever made her comfortable. Brad and I refinanced. We used the lake house as collateral. The deal didn't go through the way we expected, so the bank is taking it. You've got until the end of the month. I set the knife down. I rinsed my hands at the sink, slow, taking my time, because I have learned that when you take your time, people start filling the silence, and what they fill it with tells you everything. She filled it. It's not like you even use it anymore, Mom. You go up there twice a year. It's just sitting there. And honestly, with Dad gone, what do you need a four-bedroom lake house for? There it was. You should understand something about that lake house before I tell you the rest. My husband and I bought it in 1987 with money we did not have, on a piece of shoreline in northern Wisconsin that the realtor said was a little remote for most buyers. We could only afford it because nobody else wanted it. My husband, who taught high school chemistry for 31 years, spent every summer rebuilding that place with his own hands. He put in the dock himself. He laid the floor in the great room board by board, and there's a spot near the fireplace where he wrote our initials in the wet stain before it dried, and you can still see it if you know where to look. I know where to look. I always look. That house was not just sitting there. That house was the only place left on this earth where I could still hear his voice. But I didn't say any of that to my daughter. I asked her one question instead. Sweetheart, how did you and Brad use my lake house as collateral on your loan? The pause that came after that question was the longest pause I have ever heard. I could hear her breathing. I could hear the television on in her house, some morning show host laughing at something. And in that pause, I understood that whatever she said next was going to be a lie. And I understood that she knew I knew it. And I understood that she was going to say it anyway. We had power of attorney, she said. Remember? After your knee surgery. You signed it so I could handle things if something happened. I remembered. Of course I remembered. 2 years ago I'd had my knee replaced, and my daughter had come to the hospital with a folder of papers and a pen, and that voice she uses, the one that sounds like she's doing you a favor, and she'd said, Mom, just in case you're loopy from the anesthesia, I need to be able to pay your bills and stuff. And I, fresh out of surgery with a nerve block wearing off and my leg packed in ice, had signed where she pointed. I'd signed where she pointed. I see, I said. Well, thank you for telling me. That's it. She sounded almost disappointed. I think she'd braced for tears. For a fight. For the satisfying drama of her old mother falling apart. You're not going to argue? What's there to argue about? You said it's done. It is done, she said. And now there was a hardness in it. A little flag of triumph she couldn't keep folded. I just need you out by the 31st. Brad's cousin is a contractor and he's going to start work right away. They're flipping it. Flipping it. My husband's dock. My husband's floor. Our initials by the fireplace. They were going to flip it. End of the month, I said. I understand. I hung up. I picked the knife back up. I finished peeling the peach and I cut it into the little half-moon slices my granddaughter likes, and I put them in her lunchbox, and then I sat down at my kitchen table and I did not cry. I did not cry because I was thinking. You see, my daughter had made an assumption that morning, the same assumption she'd been making her whole life, which is that her mother is a soft, sentimental woman who can be steered with the right tone of voice. And it's true that I am sentimental. I cried at her wedding. I cry at long-distance commercials. But softness and stupidity are not the same thing, and my daughter, God help her, had spent 41 years confusing the two. What my daughter did not know, because she had never once asked, was that I spent 26 years working as a paralegal for a real estate and estate planning firm in Milwaukee. I typed up power of attorney documents for a living. I knew exactly what a financial POA could and could not do. And more than that, I knew exactly what was written in the document I had signed in that hospital room, because I am not in the habit of signing things I haven't read, anesthesia or no anesthesia. She'd handed me a durable power of attorney that was limited to healthcare decisions and the payment of routine bills from my checking account. It said so in the third paragraph, in language I had insisted my own boss use 100 times. It did not grant the authority to encumber, mortgage, transfer, or sell real property. It couldn't. I would never have signed one that did, and the lawyer she'd used to draw it up, some young man fresh out of school, whose name was on the letterhead, had used a fill-in-the-blank template and never changed the default limitations. My daughter had not read it. She had simply waived it at a bank. So I sat at my table and I considered the situation, and I will tell you, I felt something I had not felt since my husband died. I felt awake. There was a fire in me that I'd thought had gone out for good, and it turns out it had only been banked, waiting. But I am a careful woman. My husband used to say I measured twice and cut 3 times just to be sure. So before I did anything, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The next morning, I drove to the credit union, where my husband and I had banked for 30 years. And I asked to see Sharon, the branch manager, who had handled our account since before her hair went gray. We sat in her little glass office, and I told her calmly that I'd been informed my lake property had been used as collateral on a loan, and I'd like to understand how that was possible. Sharon's face did something complicated. She pulled it up. She looked at her screen for a long time, and then she looked at me. "This loan isn't with us," she said, "but the property records are public, so let me see what I can find." She typed. She frowned. "Marcia, there's a lien recorded against the lake house. It was filed 4 months ago. 4 months. My daughter had told me yesterday like it was breaking news. She'd been sitting on this for 4 months. Filed by whom?" I asked. "A mortgage company out of Chicago. And the signature on the recorded deed of trust is—" Sharon turned the screen toward me. "It's signed by your daughter. As your attorney, in fact." I looked at that signature. My daughter's loopy, confident signature. The same one she practiced in middle school. Signing my name and then her own beneath it with that little flourish. Attorney, in fact. As if she had the power. As if waving a piece of paper made it true. "Sharon," I said, "I need a copy of everything. The recorded lien, the deed of trust, all of it. And I need you to print me a copy of the deed to the property as it currently stands. The actual ownership." She printed it, and there it was, in plain county recorded ink, the lake house, owned by my husband and me, as joint tenants with right of survivorship, which meant that when he passed, it became mine alone, free and clear. No probate, no question. 100% mine, not my daughter's, not the bank's, mine. A POA that didn't authorize the sale of real estate, a deed of trust signed by someone with no authority to sign it. A lien filed against a property the signer did not own and had no power to encumber. I'm going to tell you what I did next. But first, I want to tell you about my granddaughter, because she matters to this story more than anyone. Her name is Penny. She's 9. She is the daughter of my son, my younger child, who lives 2 hours away and calls me every Sunday and has never once asked me for a dime. Penny spends a week with me every summer, and last August I took her up to the lake house for the first time. I taught her to swim off my husband's dock. I showed her the initials by the fireplace and told her about her grandfather, and she traced them with her little finger and said, "So this house remembers him?" And I said, "Yes, baby, this house remembers him." And she nodded like that was the most natural thing in the world, that a house could hold a person. That is what my daughter wanted to flip. So here's what I did. I did not call my daughter. I did not warn her. I drove home from the credit union and I called the law firm where I used to work, and I asked for the senior partner, a woman named Adaisy, who had started as a junior associate the same year I started typing her briefs, and who is now one of the best property attorneys in the state of Wisconsin. We had lunch the following week. I laid the documents out on the white tablecloth between our salads, and Adaisy read them the way I knew she would. Slow and silent. And when she finished, she set down the last page and looked at me over her reading glasses. "Marcia," she said, "your daughter committed fraud. This isn't a family dispute. This is a forged encumbrance on a property she had no authority over. The POA is unambiguous. She exceeded her authority. She made a material misrepresentation to a lender, and she recorded a fraudulent instrument with the county. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "I understand exactly what you're telling me," I said. I typed the language in that POA myself. She almost smiled. Then you know the lien is void. We can have it removed. But Marcia, I have to ask you, how far do you want to take this? Because what your daughter did is also a crime. The lender is a victim here too. They loaned real money against fraudulent collateral. When this unravels, and it will unravel, your daughter and her husband are going to be exposed to that lender and possibly to criminal charges. Once I file, I can't control where it goes. I thought about Penny tracing her grandfather's initials. I thought about my daughter, on the phone, telling me I didn't need a 4-bedroom lake house now that my husband was dead. File it, I said, and then I asked a Daisy for one more thing, and this is the part I'm not proud of, but I'm not going to lie to you because this is my story and I promised myself I'd tell it straight. I asked her how long we could wait, not because I had doubts, because my daughter had told me I had until the end of the month, and I wanted to let her get all the way to the edge of that cliff she'd built before I let her find out the ground wasn't there. That was the cruel part. I admit it. I wanted her to feel sure. For the next 3 weeks, I played the part she'd written for me. When she called to ask if I'd started packing, I told her yes, slowly. That it was hard. That there were so many memories. I let my voice break, and it wasn't even hard to do because the grief was real even if the helplessness was a costume. She softened, the way people do when they've won and can afford to be generous. I know it's hard, Mom, but it's the right thing for everybody. She actually said that. The right thing for everybody. Brad even came by one afternoon, my son-in-law, with a stack of flattened moving boxes he'd gotten from the liquor store, and he set them in my living room and clapped me on the shoulder and said, "No rush on the heavy stuff. The contractor's not starting demo until the 5th. Demo. He told me to my face in my living room that they were going to demolish part of the house my husband built, and he said it the way you'd mentioned the weather. I thanked him for the boxes. I made him a cup of coffee. I asked about his golf game, and the whole time I was thinking about the certified letter a Daisy had sent to that mortgage company in Chicago, and the call she'd already gotten back from their general counsel. A call in which the words, "We were defrauded and we will be pursuing the borrowers," had been used freely. The day it came apart, I was at the lake house. I'd driven up alone the morning before. I wanted to be there. I wanted to sit on my husband's dock and watch the water and be in the place while it was still mine to be in, which it had been the entire time, though nobody but me and a Daisy and a lawyer in Chicago knew it yet. I made coffee in the old percolator. I sat by the fireplace. I put my hand on the initials. My daughter called at 11:40 in the morning. I let it ring twice before I answered. She was not using her favor voice anymore. She was screaming, "Mom, Mom, the bank called us. They're saying they're saying it's fraud. They're saying the lien is void. They said you have a lawyer. They're talking about the DA. Mom, what did you do?" I held the phone a little away from my ear and I looked out at the lake. There was a loon out past the dock. They make the loneliest, most beautiful sound, loons. My husband loved them. "I read the paperwork, sweetheart," I said. "What?" "The power of attorney. The one you had me sign in the hospital." I read it. It only covers health care and routine bills. "It never gave you the right to touch my property. I knew that the day you told me. I knew it before you finished your sentence." The silence on the line was different this time. It wasn't the silence of someone building a lie. It was the silence of someone watching the floor disappear. "You let me think," she started. "I let you think exactly what you wanted to think," I said. "Same as you've done to me my whole life. You assumed I was soft. You assumed I was stupid with grief. You assumed that because I cry at commercials, I couldn't read a contract. You never once asked what your mother did for 26 years because you've never once been curious about a single thing in my life that didn't directly concern you. So no, I didn't argue. There was nothing to argue about. You signed your name to a fraud, and you recorded it with the county, and you did it to a house your father built with his hands, and you were going to demolish the place where he wrote our initials so that Brad's cousin could put in granite countertops." She was crying now. I could hear it. "Mom, please, we could lose everything. The bank wants the money back. There's talk about charges Brad could—" "I know," I said. "My lawyer has been very thorough. You have to fix this. You have to call them and tell them it's fine. Tell them you authorized it." "No," I said. "Just that. No," I said. Just that. No. I have said no to that girl maybe 4 times in her entire life. Every other time the no eventually turned into a yes, because she wore me down, because I couldn't stand her disappointment, because it was easier to give in than to hold the line through her storm. She knew the pattern. She was already gearing up to wait me out. But this time, the no was different, and she heard it. "You're going to let your own daughter go to jail," she said. And she made it ugly, the way you do when you've got nothing left. "I am going to let my own daughter face the consequences of forging her mother's name on a fraudulent mortgage," I said. "Those are not the same thing, though I understand why you'd want to blur them. And I'll tell you something else. If you had come to me, if you and Brad had sat at my kitchen table and said, 'Mom, we're in real trouble. We made bad choices. We need help,' I would have moved heaven and earth for you. I would have sold things. I would have remortgaged my own home in the city. I would have given you every dollar I had because that's what I have always done. But you didn't ask. You didn't think you had to. You just took. You looked at me and you saw a soft old woman with assets, and you decided to help yourself. And you told me on a Tuesday morning while I was peeling a peach for your niece. I shouldn't have brought up Penny. It was a cut I didn't need to make, but I was 67 years old, and I had buried my husband and raised this child and typed 10,000 legal documents for other people's families falling apart, and for once in my life, I let myself say the whole true thing. She hung up on me. I sat on the dock until the sun went down. I'd love to tell you it all wrapped up neatly. It didn't. The lien was removed within 6 weeks, voided exactly as Ades said it would be. The lake house was mine again, free and clear the way it had always actually been. But my daughter and Brad were in real trouble with that mortgage company, and the trouble was theirs to carry, and they carried it badly. They sold their own house eventually, the one with the granite countertops they hadn't even appreciated. They avoided criminal charges, but only because the lender decided that recouping money mattered more than vengeance, which is a mercy my daughter has never once credited me for arranging. Though I did ask a daisy to encourage that outcome. I didn't want my child in prison. I'm her mother. I wanted her to learn something. Those are not the same thing either. We don't talk now. It's been almost 2 years. She blames me. In her version of events, I destroyed her family out of spite over a vacation house I barely used. That's the story she tells, and I've stopped trying to correct it because you cannot reason a person out of a position that lets them off the hook. But here is the part that matters, the part I hold on to. Last summer, my son brought Penny up to the lake house for her week with me. She's 10 now. She ran straight to the fireplace the way she does, and she got down on her knees and found the initials and traced them, and she looked up at me and said, "It still remembers him. It still remembers him," I said. And I thought, this is what I fought for. Not the granite, not the equity, not the 4 bedrooms my daughter thought I didn't need. I fought for a 9-year-old certainty that a house can hold a person. I fought for the right to sit on my husband's dock and listen to the loons. I fought because somewhere along the way, I had let everyone in my life, including myself, believe that being kind meant being a doormat, and they are not the same thing. And it took my own daughter trying to sell my husband's grave marker disguised as a vacation home for me to finally learn the difference. So if you're sitting there, soft-hearted and grieving and tired, and someone in your life has mistaken your kindness for weakness, let me tell you what my husband used to tell me. Measure twice. Read everything. Sign nothing you haven't read, especially in a hospital, especially when someone you love is holding the pen and telling you to hurry. And when the moment comes, and it will, do not be afraid to be the woman they never thought you were. I'm 70 now. The percolator still works. The loons still come back every spring, and the house still remembers him. It always will. I've had 2 years to sit with what happened, and the thing I keep coming back to isn't the fraud or the lien or even the lake house itself. It's how long I let myself be small. My daughter didn't decide one morning that her mother was a soft, steerable woman she could help herself to. She decided it slowly, over 40 years, because I taught her to. Every time I turned my no into a yes to avoid her storm, I was filing away a little instruction in her. This woman folds. So when she stood at that hospital bed with a pen, she wasn't gambling. She was collecting on a habit I'd spent a lifetime building. That's the hard truth I had to swallow. The cruelty she showed me grew in soil I'd tilled. Cause and effect doesn't stop being true just because it points back at you. But here's the other half, and it's the half I want you to carry out of this. The thing that saved that house wasn't luck. It was 26 years of reading every contract that crossed my desk, of insisting the language be exact, of never signing what I hadn't read even with a nerve block wearing off, and someone I loved telling me to hurry. Knowing things matters. Staying curious about your own life, your own paperwork, your own rights. The boring details everyone assumes an old woman won't bother with. That's not vanity. That's armor. Brad waved a document at a bank without reading it. I read mine in a hospital bed. One of those choices is why I still have the doc, and one is why he lost his granite countertops. And none of the knowing would have mattered if I hadn't found the spine to use it. I could have read every word of that POA and still picked up the phone and said, "Fine, I'll authorize it. Just stop being angry at me." The hardest thing I did wasn't hiring a daisy. It was holding the line through my daughter's tears and her ugliest accusations, sitting on that dock while she screamed and saying one word and meaning it. No. After a lifetime of that word dissolving in my mouth. So if I could reach back and tell the younger version of me anything, it's this. Be kind, but learn the difference between kindness and surrender, because the people who love you the wrong way will spend years convincing you they're the same thing. Keep learning. Keep reading. Keep asking what your own life actually contains, because the day will come when the only thing standing between you and ruin is whether you bother to understand the fine print. And when that day comes, find the strength to be the person they never believed you were. I waited until I was 67. Don't wait that long. The loons still come back every spring, and so can you.